Hello, I wanted to thank everybody for coming out today and being patient with us as we continue to do these Zoom meetings. I know we're all excited to meet in person and we look forward to doing that soon. I think we're rounding that corner here rather soon. We will be recording this talk for our YouTube channel. And if you haven't been on our really great discussions from a new apartment complex that's going to go over by the Sports Authority campus to discussions on social media advertising and how to set yourself up for Facebook or Google ads or something of those things. So if you haven't been to our YouTube channel, please check it out. There's a lot of great content. Be having a question and answer session. We'll ask that you use the chat feature to ask your questions and we'll share those with our speaker. And so it's a pleasure right now to introduce our speaker, Wade Burkholder, who's the planning manager at the city of Englewood. I think it was, a little while ago, sometime in the middle of last year, Wade reached out to the chamber and asked us if we could put together a couple of focus groups to talk about what's working and what's not working with the Unified Development Code. The city is in the process of revising that and looking at our community as it sits today as compared to back when the Unified Development Code was last researched. And so we are excited to have Wade come and give us a little update on where they are in that process. And if you have not seen a Unified Development Code, there are pages and pages, and we could probably spend all day talking about just all the elements of a Unified Development Code. So we've asked Wade to come here today and just to speak to us on a couple of items to get us started, and hopefully we'll have him back again soon as we continue to work through this important document for our community. Wade, you can take it from here.
Everybody, I want to first start out by thanking David for the invite to attend this morning, and I am very happy to be here to talk with you all about this pretty large effort that the city is undertaking right now. And just bear with me, I share my screen here. There we go. Trust you all can see that. If not, just let me know. But we are at the city undertaking the rewrite of the Englewood Unified Development Code. Starting off, just a little bit of levity here this morning. As David mentioned, this document is quite dense. And you can see the comment, "I admire your determination to make this plan work." As you all, I'm sure, are aware, there are many different plans at the city. There's the Englewood Forward Comprehensive Plan, there's the Parks and Recreation Plan, the City Council Strategic Plan. I could go on and on. But the point I wanted to make here is that the Unified Development Code isn't necessarily a plan. The Unified Development Code is the code for all kinds of development, every type of development you want to consider in Englewood. So it establishes all the parameters for new development and infill and redevelopment in the community. So for example, you know, you've heard quite a bit about the redevelopment of the city center property throughout the last couple months, and with the newly created Downtown Development Authority. And the regulations can be found within that document as to what can be built, how tall it can be built, what setbacks are required for new buildings, landscaping, parking. You know, as I briefly showed that very first slide, that sort of that word cloud, and all of that information is in the Unified Development Code. So it really is the law for the city of Englewood when it comes to new development. But I also want to point out, it also regulates certain things. Say you want to replace your fence on your property, or build a new fence, or put in a shed, or a gazebo, or anything like that. All the regulations and parameters for those types of things are in the Unified Development Code. So if you want to brand what the code really is, you can just say, it's all in there. If you want to do something with your property, or do new development in the city, it's in the code. Now the challenge we have with that is it's a nearly 400-page document. So it's an intimidating document, and very difficult to maneuver many times. So many jurisdictions don't look to update those codes with a lot of excitement behind it, because it's a very lengthy, very complicated process. And for example, in Englewood, the Unified Development Code has not been updated comprehensively since 2004. So that is the answer as to why we're looking at rewriting the code now. As you also realize, communities change over time and can change quite drastically, quite rapidly. And so the codes that were written in 2004 in Englewood, many of them may not and do not apply to the kind of market we're in with regard to housing construction, or some of the new national trends aren't necessarily incorporated into this document. It's not to say that City Council has not amended it over those, say, 17, 18 years. You all are familiar with the accessory dwelling unit ordinance and the short-term rental regulations that were more recently, within the last year or two, that the City Council adopted. Those were really to make sure Englewood was competitive with the surrounding communities, and to make sure Englewood had a way to address some of these newer phenomenons that we see happening from time to time, in answer to things like affordability. Accessory dwelling units are a way to address affordability, one of the ways to address affordability in a community. So Englewood wanted to make sure we had something on the books that would allow that type of use to occur on the property. So as I said, just to recap, what and why, many communities change over the years, and we want to make sure that the document, the law in this case, really reflects the community's values, really addresses the community needs. And, over the last few years, we've realized more and more that there are some holes in the Unified Development Code that the city wanted to address. So we wanted to go ahead and start this process to really comprehensively look at this and make sure the values of the community are addressed. Those new techniques, new concepts are addressed in the code and so forth. And so here we are. Over the last 5 months, we really took on the first part of this project, and that was to spend as much time in the outreach and assessment of the existing code as we possibly could. So since middle of last year, during the summer, we put the plan together to reach out to the community, to really listen to what is working with the code and what is not working with the code. And we want to use that information that we heard to really focus on what we need to in the next phase of the project, which is the official rewrite. So as I mentioned, we want to be competitive with our surrounding jurisdictions. So for example, many jurisdictions had short-term regulations and Englewood did not. So a lot of people were coming to Englewood to do their short-term rentals. And, everybody sees the concept differently. There's the pros and cons of short-term rentals. And protection of the neighborhoods was one of those issues that the city wanted to get a handle on. So we put these plans and regulations in place to really get a handle on short-term rentals. So those types of processes again, we wanted to come up with and hear from the community as to what was working and what was not. So over the last 5 months, we did that, and we ended up with this 2020 Unified Development Code assessment report, which was recently published. It is on our city website. The link is there at the bottom. At the end, I'll recap that and provide my information for anybody that wants to either have the document just emailed to them directly or talk more about the concepts that are found in this document. As David mentioned, we could spend hours, if not days, talking about this topic. But we're not going to do that today. We are just going to hit on some of the main highlights here. But I want to mention that within the final assessment and throughout the community input and engagement process, there were 5 main themes or concepts that emerged that we heard a lot about. And so we feel that going forward into the next phase of this, these are the 5 areas where we're going to be doing most of the work. So the first theme or concept we heard a lot about is parking and walkability. The second is sustainability and green infrastructure in Englewood. Another main theme is housing affordability, also neighborhood character, and residential dimensional and design standards. That would be related to height of new residential structures, bulk plane. You might have heard a lot about bulk plane in Englewood over the last few months. Overall design standards to protect existing neighborhood character is the best way to summarize those last 2. One of the things I want to focus on a little bit today is the parking and walkability concept that we heard. I heard a lot about over this last 5 months. We all know we all see things differently. And this is an illustration of the parking issue that we might see in a typical jurisdiction and much like Englewood. A typical shopping center developer sees in the top left picture, 1 or 2 major tenants with a row of shops, maybe some pad sites for a fast food restaurant or something like that. You'll see rows of parking, some landscaping within the islands to break up the concrete. Going down directly below that, a shopping center seen by a developer. They want to lease as much space as they can. So they're going to pack their site with shops, pad sites, major tenants. They may not necessarily care as much about the landscaping, the pedestrian amenities on that site, because they're coming at it as, we want to sell and lease as much space as we can. Going up to the top right with the major tenant, major tenant doesn't want competition necessarily, so they just want to pack their site with parking so they can get as many customers in there to buy their goods, and landscaping might be pushed all the way up to the corners, and again, pedestrian walkways and walkability of sites may fall by the wayside. And then in the last slide, bottom right on my screen, You know, maybe this is a shopping center seen by the city. Lots of nice features, water fountains, landscaping, green spaces. But of course, you say, where's the parking in that scenario? So the point of this slide is, you know, we at the city need to find the balance here. We need to find the middle ground. And this ties really, these two concepts are, you know, almost directly related. You know, if you want to supply a lot of parking, your walkability and your pedestrian connections, your bike facilities, they're going to fall by the wayside most likely. Whereas the city wants to make sure we have a site that's nicely designed. We want it to be, you know, pretty, if you will. But again, we recognize that people need parking to make their business work. And by no means am I saying that, you know, the city wants to take away all your parking. That's not at all what I'm saying here. I'm saying what we need to do is find the middle ground between these two concepts. So within this assessment report, we offer up some suggestions as to how we might address these concepts to find a middle ground. Right now, the City of Englewood parking regulations are really very generous when you compare Englewood to other jurisdictions in the metro area, as well as some other cities and jurisdictions, you know, nationwide and in the state of Colorado as well. You know, for example, if you have a restaurant use, you know, we require one parking space per 100 square feet of floor area, gross square footage of your property. You know, that could end up to be a lot of parking spaces. Whereas some of the other surrounding jurisdictions, I'm going to use Lakewood just because I have their data real handy. Their minimum parking requirement, they require 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet of restaurant gross floor area. So you can see the difference there is Englewood is requiring a lot more parking for the restaurant use than other jurisdictions. So one of the suggestions we want to look at more is developing the concept of a parking minimum and a parking maximum based on the site context. So if you look at Englewood, for example, you know, you can see along Englewood Parkway seas of parking lots, you know, parked at these really generous parking standards versus downtown, which is much more restricted, versus residential neighborhoods, which is a different kind of parking, versus North Broadway, South Broadway. So there's these parking areas within the city that really, due to their context, due to the nature of their development, really could benefit from different parking standards. So when I say parking minimums and parking maximums, so for example, Englewood can keep the 1 space per 100 square feet if we want, using that as the parking minimum. But then, you know, maybe we require 2 spaces for 750 square feet as a maximum. So it's more of a negotiation. It's more of a flexibility that's built into the code that we'd like to research farther to see if that concept will work in Englewood. One of the primary tenets of this assessment report is to look for areas of flexibility in the code for the community to really negotiate based on their situation a little bit more. Some of these standards that, as I mentioned earlier, are law. So we really can't right now vary from that 1 space per 100 square feet. You know, you're stuck with it. So you're going to provide 50 spots. And If you are using 50 spots for your restaurant, that's wonderful. We don't want to take that away at all. We don't want to change that. But as you can see, in certain areas of the city, there are a lot of empty parking spots, which could be an opening for enhanced walkability. I'm going to pick on Englewood Parkway again. But if you could vision Englewood Parkway being more of what this bottom picture is, that a shopping center seen by the city, you know, picture that a really nice wide sidewalk with plantings, a separation from the street. Really what walkability is aimed at is really connecting the retail points of the city, the activity centers of the city. So if you look at city center, you know, downtown, the medical district, you've heard this concept through the DDA a lot. You know, we want to connect those major components of the city. So how can we write the law, write the code to enhance some of these concepts? So, you know, we think about things like, you know, design standards for bus stops. You know, how can we make them more attractive, more inviting, less prone to activities that we may not wish to see at bus stops? You know, how can we require those of new developers, say, that want to build a major shopping center? You know, the flexibility in parking, again, can really create a place for parks or green space, or, you know, bike facilities, bike repair facilities along these major routes to encourage people to feel safer to walk, to feel like it's a pleasure to walk and not have to deal with car exhaust and cars going fast, and create that environment. So, you know, we think there's a lot of opportunity there to develop incentives for people to enhance their landscaping, enhance their walkways. Maybe we require that sidewalks be installed at a greater width, so we can make sure that, you know, it's comfortable for people to pass one another, so you don't have to step off into the median or something like that. Making sure that the sidewalks are not broken and crumbling is also a major part of this. So, you know, when we see new developments, you know, maybe we should require that your sidewalk be upgraded to this new standard. So all that being said is that parking and walkability are something that can go hand in hand. You know, the city has studied a couple years ago the South Broadway corridor, and, you know, the ULI study for healthy corridors was submitted. That's another plan, remember my first slide that I talked about, that this code can help implement. So again, this isn't necessarily another plan, it's a code that implements plans. So that's essentially what a unified development code does. You know, I encourage you to download and read the assessment report. It's not a ridiculously long document, it's about 70 pages. There are some appendix that you can look at if you want to. There's a best practices appendix, which looks at jurisdictions across the country and how they handle parking and walkability. So that information is there as we move forward. But you can see a lot of other ideas or suggestions. They're really suggestions at this point. And I say that because there hasn't been any new code written. These are just ideas that we want to look at further when we do officially start the rewrite. So one other concept that we heard a lot about over the last 5 months is the concept of home occupations. The current code does permit home occupations. but I'm going to say that the current code is very restrictive on what is characterized as a home occupation. For example, if you wanted to have a beauty shop, a beautician, somebody to cut your hair out of their home, that's prohibited in Englewood. And, as we look at other jurisdictions around the area, that's not the case. And you go back and you start to think of, well, why did Englewood choose to prohibit, these uses as home occupations? And I'll be honest, sometimes we just don't know. Home occupations, really look at, negative impacts to the residential community. So if you have a business that you want to run out of your home that generates a lot of traffic, a lot of deliveries, a lot of noise, that's something we generally want to, discourage, because we do want to maintain the neighborhood character. However, some of these, beauticians, daycare centers, dog walkers, some of these, in today's world with COVID, with, the sort of new horizons we all have to look forward to, a lot of these things I think really can be opened up to be allowed in residential neighborhoods to run your business out of your home. So what this really is looking at is what specific home occupations should we include in neighborhoods. We're still not going to budge on home occupations that involve automobile repair, landscaping businesses, because again, those tend to at times create negative impacts in terms of outside storage, noise from automobile repair. Now, again, auto repair gets a little tricky because there's nothing that prohibits you or your son or daughter or husband or wife to work on their own car as a hobby. So we're not regulating that. We're just regulating the for money commercial enterprise of an automobile repair shop. So things we see a lot of are bookkeeping, accounting, a lot of computer work, graphic design. We have therapists that do work out of their home. We have chefs that do some work out of their home. We do have a business in Englewood where she sells plants out of her home. And it's interesting because she does that primarily all online. She will take your order and deliver your plants to you, but it's all online. Nobody's coming to her house to do that. So this is one area, again, one of the primary tenets is we're looking for flexibility in the code and making things easier and not being so restrictive, because we want to, and we've heard from the community that this is one of our values in the community, is that we want to encourage small business, small work from home companies. And so we want to make sure that's permitted. And that's sort of the focus of this whole effort, is to make sure the values of the community are reflected. Again, going back to the last time we did this comprehensively was 2004. So things have changed a lot in those 17, 18 years. So to summarize, due to the fact that we have run out of flip charts, I declare that this planning meeting is adjourned. Planning meeting isn't necessarily adjourned because I do want to have plenty of time for questions and comments. Again, here is our link to the final report. I apologize for that typo up there. And then my contact information, you can email me at any time, call me. Again, it's a very lengthy document, and What I also want to mention is that City Council has authorized us to post the request for proposals to find a consultant to help us with the rewrite. That request for proposal is out until, I believe, mid-April. So we are looking to start the rewrite of this code in the summer. So we are looking forward to doing a lot more public outreach. As I said, it will center around those 5 topics. We have a whole bunch of different options for the community to consider. We'll hear which option may be the most favored, and then really start the drafting of actual language for the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council to discuss and finally adopt. So it probably realistically will be about a year process from this summer. So this is not a quick project to do, just simply because if you change one section of code, it often affects many other sections of code. And you can see with parking, it gets into a lot of technical formulas, math, believe it or not, which is not a fun thing for many of us. So anyway, I just wanted to put that expectation out there. Is it's going to take probably a little while for us to finish this, but within that time frame, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for us to talk to you all and the community to make sure we get this right and that we reflect the community's goals and values and implement some of these plans that the city has already on the books. So again, I'll stop talking. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.